Hi ho ho, it's me, Ang Lee. Back at it again with a new episode of the Boy Time Podcast, and as always, I'm joined by Babby and Paul.
Hi.
For the first time in a long time, we're going to be talking about Ang Lee, and this is a shout out to all of the old heads, as they used to say, to listen to the original Boy Time Podcast, where we talked about, I don't know if we ever talked about Ang Lee, but he was constantly in our thumbnails. Whenever we didn't have anything to put in the thumbnails, we put a little picture of Ang Lee, so we'll be able to do that again, which is fun. We'll talk about that later. We don't have a super busy week. We have a couple things to talk about. We've had unfortunate podcast timing again, even though we had fortunate podcast timing last week with the King Gizzard single coming out the day we were recording. But of course, as of the day we are recording, the PlayStation Showcase that is kind of kicking off a bunch of gaming announcements, that is tomorrow as of us recording. So can't report on it. Can't say what's in it. I guess we can make predictions. I feel like we usually do this whenever we get podcast timing. Whenever we hit it wrong. So, does anyone have any predictions for what is going to be in the PlayStation Showcase tomorrow?
Some game that's gonna make top in Twitter because someone put an LGBT character in it.
That's a good one.
That's probably
That's going on my bingo card.
They have a gay kiss
7
in the
indie
trailer.
dev games that nobody knows.
Yes, probably.
True.
Yeah. Although that would be more realistic if that was a Nintendo Direct.
That's true.
Those
PlayStation does
also
that
true.
sometimes.
They do that,
Knack 2 DLC.
Well, that would be interesting.
Not a new game, just DLC.
DLC for the PS4 game.
Yeah.
It came out like 5 years ago.
They're going to talk about like a really different controller since Xbox has been doing the pro stuff. They're going to be like, here's our response to that.
Oh, they already have that.
They're going to do another one.
Another one. They were showing off pictures this week of like their accessibility controller. It's like the giant joystick.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they do have like, what do they call those like controllers that have like the buttons on the back and they're like super customizable?
Oh, like the Scuff controllers.
Yeah, Scuff. They have one of those. So yeah, I don't know. I saw some people throw around Spider-Man 2 since that is supposed to come out this year. I feel like that's probably gonna be
Spider-Man Fortnite.
Spider-Man.
That'll be
Well, Spider-Man is in Fortnite right now. Although it's
Spider-Man Fortnite.
It's not Spider-Man PS4 in Fortnite. It's Miles Morales and Spider-Man 2099 are in Fortnite right now. Because what isn't in Fortnite?
True.
So, yeah, there's that. So I saw that's been getting thrown around. People have been bringing up possibly Death Stranding 2, I suppose.
Fucking Sim 2?
I think they're way early in development on that one. Like, Hideo Kojima's been posting, like, mocap pictures. So, like, I doubt they'd have a trailer ready by now. So, I'm going to say that one's less likely. Some people brought up the Last of Us multiplayer game. That might, I don't know. I feel like that could possibly come out this year. I don't know if we have a date on that, but
I don't know.
It's a possibility. Trying to strike while the iron's hot on this whole Last of Us property. Now that people actually care about it. Nobody cared about it before the show came out. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I don't think there's going to be anything too groundbreaking. Elden Ring 2 is probably going to be there, though, if I had to guess.
Announced before the DLC for the first one came out. Let's go.
Yep. Especially since we haven't gotten a new Bloodborne game yet. It's been like what, 7 years? It came out in 2016. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be getting a Bloodborne 2. There's no way, there is absolutely no way that there is going to be a Bloodborne 2 at the PlayStation Showcase tomorrow.
There's totally gonna be one now. Let's go.
Yeah, I don't know. It's either you can take that quote out of context, or you can like put that quote on the trailer when it comes out tomorrow, or you can just take it seriously and there is really not going to be a Bloodborne trailer tomorrow. So really I win either way.
True.
So get wrecked, idiots. But that's it for gaming news. There isn't any. But we'll talk about it next week, I suppose. We do have a couple of, I guess, I don't really know what to label these. I guess technically movies. Wait, did I already? No, I didn't already talk about this. I think I announced a couple weeks ago that Paramount Plus is merging with Showtime. Well, we officially got both a price point and I guess a release date. And a release date for when the Showtime app is going to be shuttered. Not Shudder the
Not
horror
Shudder, the
streaming service. Shuttered as in closing down. But yes, Paramount Plus with Showtime, it is going to be launching on June 27th at $12 per month, which is, I think, the same price as if you get Paramount Plus with Showtime added. I don't know, but I think this is just one service, and it's just going to be, I don't know what they're going to call it, probably like Plus or something, to just completely streamline it.
Of course.
Taking cues from the competition, I suppose.
It's just going to be a play button. Nothing else.
A play button. That's YouTube's thing.
That's true. Aren't they thought of everything?
They could just do Plus. Mountain Plus.
Mm,
That's what they should do.
great.
Yeah, I don't think we have a name for it. It might just be Paramount Plus with Showtime. That's how it was announced. Which, I'm going to say it, is probably worse than Max. I don't know why you would make it that clunky. So hopefully they get a new name. And then the Showtime app, it will be shuttered by the end of the year at some point. So, yeah, I don't know. Showtime's got some good stuff. I got like all of the A24 movies on there. So, there's a reason to get Paramount Plus with Showtime, I suppose. There's enough there, I think, to warrant a purchase. Especially since Paramount was, they pumped out all the good movies in like the 60s and the 70s. They pumped out so many things in the early days of Hollywood that someone actually had to trigger antitrust laws to get them to stop making so much money, which never happens actually. Although I think that was, I forget what's the difference between vertical and horizontal integration. But I think the thing with Paramount was that Paramount owned theaters. So it was like, we got to go to the new Paramount movie, but we could only go to the Paramount theater to see the Paramount movie. And then I guess lawmakers like, you can't do that. I'm just waiting for Disney to do that, though, and no one's going to do anything. We're already headed there, with Disney taking
Let's
like
go.
every single showtime at every single theater whenever Black Panther 5 comes out or whatever. So, yeah, I don't know. Paramount's got some good stuff. Showtime's got some good stuff. I think this is a good move because there's no reason to get both of them. Because I don't think there's enough in either of them unless you really love Nickelodeon and you just really want to watch Back at the Barnyard. Then I guess that's the reason to get Paramount Plus right now.
It's the only reason to live.
It's really the only reason. Me and my girlfriend watched an episode of that the other day. Man, the animation is way worse than I imagined. I remember
Jimmy Neutron. It just looks so bad.
Yeah. There's something about 2000s television animation that just did not age very well. I'm not sure why that is. I don't know. Someone will look into it and write a 5-hour video essay on it. And I won't watch it.
Oh.
And the next thing I wanted to talk about, it's this, I guess AI has been a topic, a general topic in the news recently. Everybody and their dad is scared about it, about the upcoming singularity. But I think the most troubling thing that AI has been used for are these dang Wes Anderson movie trailers. I hate them so much. Please, if you make Wes Anderson AI movie trailers, I need to say that.
It makes me so mad. It's kind of hard to describe.
Yes. These, I was about to quote my old tweet that actually got us banned, but I don't think I should. I don't
I
think
wonder
We've said
why.
worse things on this podcast.
that's probably true. But yes, I actually happened across one of these. I did not. Before they kind of blew up, it was like, I think it actually showed up on like the Boy Time channels recommended. While I was looking to upload something, there was a video recommended. I think it was, I don't remember if it was like a Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, where it was one of those two. But Wes Anderson, I'm like, oh, the thumbnail makes it look like someone did this. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I want to see that. If like a bunch of people got together and, made a bunch of sets and did something akin to a Wes Anderson style, that's really cool, and I would like to see that. And it's not. It's all AI. And then the comments are the worst, because you scroll down and I was expecting a bunch of people to be like, what the hell is this? Why are you doing this? Everyone's like, wow, I can't believe this is real. I'm like, what? Look at the faces. What are you talking about?
So real.
Yeah. I think, and I think the only reason they're using Wes Anderson is because he has a fairly recognizable style, and it's an easily replicable style by AI. You just have to make it look pretty, make it look kind of French and Baroque, and then get some weirdo colors, and then wow, you have a Wes Anderson thing. And I want to quote Roger Ebert, which I hardly ever do, but I think Ebert had a good quote. I think he was describing Battlefield Earth, that the movie that by the guy who made Scientology. Ebert said, the director, Roger Christian, has learned from better films that directors sometimes tilt their cameras, but he has not learned why. And I feel like that kind of adequately describes these people who think they're doing something with this Wes Anderson thing. It's like they know that Wes Anderson has a style and it's pretty neat, but they don't know why it works in Wes Anderson movies. Because everything that Wes Anderson does is very deliberate. And why it's blocked a certain way, why things are shot the way they are. And it doesn't lend well to cheap replications by software. So they've been getting more and more traction, more and more people have been seeing them, and they've been making more and more of them. So I thought I would say something because it does make me quite angry that no one seems to be having the same opinion that I have, and that these are all
They do. It's just these people flood these comment sections. Like, it's so stupid. I mean, on Twitter, it's everywhere now, but like everybody with a blue check mark just gets put to the top, so it's just brain dead comments for like the first 25.
That's true. Yeah, it's rough. So
A lot of these people aren't even like that into movies or anything. They just like don't understand what goes into it, or composition, or framing, or color
No.
grading, or anything. They just see like a center frame portrait of something in like a somewhat cool vignette lighting
Yeah.
with like some wacky architecture, and they're like, "Oh my god,
This looks just like Wes
this looks
Anderson.
just like the
I
real
would
Dustin
pay to
Film."
see the whole movie that's like this. No, you wouldn't.
These writers that are striking will save all of you in 10 years. I swear to God.
Yeah, that really is true. I think I guess a good companion piece. I think Drew Gooden just made a very good video about AI and like how the writer's strike has been more directly calling out AI and like why an AI written script would suck, or it would take all of the purpose out of it. Like, and this is a point he brings up where it's like the only point of watching a movie isn't like you're not just watching it, or at least for people who enjoy the art and craft of movie making. It isn't just like something to throw on in the background. It's like something to absorb the human. There's a human element to it, where
Yeah.
someone is pouring their artistic vision into this medium, and in fact, a lot of the movies I'm talking about, if they were written by AI, I would hate them.
These people don't view art as something that like you gain something personal from, or like have like just an attraction toward it. They view it as a product. They've gone so
Yeah.
brain dead in their viewage of media where it's like, how can I turn this into 20 spin-offs? I see
Right.
this all the time on any Marvel movie thread where it's like, oh my god, they can make 3 spin-offs off of this. I'm like, stop.
Why?
Like, you are not making these things. This is not how art should be viewed.
No.
You are commodifying in your own head TV shows that you have no idea how are made and you do not make, and you're like, yeah, I like that. Let's make 20 spin-off shows of this.
Yes. Yes.
It's just like
So strange.
Yeah. I don't know how much of that culture is inherited from comic culture, and where they do make spin-offs
be a
of
little
every
bit.
single
Yeah.
character that has ever been even just like background characters that was in one shot of Avengers issue 718 gets their own comic. It's like, I don't know how much of it is comic book fans was like, finally we'll be able to see this character, this beloved character that I've loved my entire childhood. I've always been a big fan of Miss Marvel. Or whatever was coming up. Nick Fury talking to green guys. I think that's the new one. Something like that.
I love green guys.
Yeah. So I think it's almost a little bit more understandable with Marvel, and I
Yes.
think I have the unique position of being a Star Wars fan to say it is worse when Star Wars does it. In that, it was just 3 movies from the 70s and 80s, and then George Lucas milked it, and then Disney bought it, and now they're milking it, and they're trying to treat Star Wars like it is a comic book franchise, and that every single character gets a spin-off show. And I don't think Star Wars works like that. But people eat it up. So who am I to say?
movie's a movie to some people.
Yeah. They just want to see lasers.
Pew pew.
Who doesn't?
Sometimes the people don't know what they want when it comes to that.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
That is true. That is true.
Or an AI definitely doesn't know what you want.
No. They will be able to perfectly replicate people who are genuinely excited for Disney live-action remakes. They'll be able to spit out 1,000 of those, and those people
And that
can
small
eat
group
those
of
up.
people will be happy.
It'll be great. Everyone will love it. And then if you want to see a movie that someone actually cares about, you're gonna have to like troll through the underbelly to find like a real artist out there,
Too.
which is gonna be pretty difficult. A24 might be the only. I don't even they're kind of an indie studio, but they're pretty dang big at this point.
Yeah.
But like they might be the only ones that are gonna be putting out good stuff consistently. I feel like, you know, people go see an A24 movie because it's an A24 movie. Nobody's like, dude, there's a new Paramount movie. We gotta go see it. Lionsgate is pumping out a new one. We gotta go see the new Lionsgate picture. So yeah, I don't know. We're in a weird spot, and I think a lot is going to come down to this writer's strike and what comes out of it. Hopefully the writers get at least the majority of their demands, if not all of them. But at this point, you know, I have no idea. Because, you know, Disney is, I don't know if I talked about this, but Disney's requiring all their writers to work through the strike or they're going to lose their jobs. Disney can do that because they're Disney. And I don't know if their reputation even matters to them anymore, as long as they're making money.
Well, I think for probably that just average person, which is like tens of millions of Americans, they probably don't care about anything like writer or anything. They just want Disney movie.
That's
so,
true. And, you know, internationally, like these.
Oh yeah, for sure.
These live action remakes are like really big in China for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah, and I don't even think it's most people in China are going to be able to even get to news of, hey, in California there's a writer's strike.
No, I don't.
No, they don't care.
No, there would be no reason.
I don't think they can even find it if they wanted to. A lot of them.
Yeah.
They can find it. It's just they don't care about it. It's not. It's irrelevant to them.
Yeah.
I mean, China has its own TV industry that doesn't rely on U.S. media for the most part.
Yes. Yes.
Which is rare because most of the world does, usually. Or it's like U.S. is kind of everywhere in terms of media.
Yeah. Yeah. We got the Hollywood.
Yes, sir.
Or Hollyweird, as some like to call it.
Bollywood will overtake it one day. It'll be a glorious day.
I sure hope so. But I guess this is as good a transition as any to talk about 3 movies that are not Hollywood productions.
Let's go.
That's right. I watched. I was throwing around names for this week, and I watched 3 martial arts movies. And I wanted to call it Weeaboo Week for the reason that none of these movies take place in Japan, but they all have elements that are misinterpreted to be Japanese by people who pretend to be into Japanese culture. But I don't know if that really works. So I'm just going to call this Martial Arts Week because I don't know. I can't call it Kung Fu Week because they're all different martial arts styles. And yeah, there's one, actually, it kind of gets into a little interesting territory because 2 of them take place in China. One is, I guess, technically Taiwanese, because Ang Lee is from Taiwan. And then one is from Hong Kong in the 70s, so not part of China at that point.
Unless you're China.
Unless you're China, then it is part of China. But
Which it is a British colony.
Yeah, it was in the 78. 78 was it still a British colony?
I think so.
I don't know when that switch off happened.
I feel like that was the 80s when the British left. I could be wrong though.
It could be. I don't know.
It was a British colony until 1841.
1841.
So way long ago.
Oh.
They still had
Basically,
hands in there for a long time though.
yeah, until its handover to Chinese rule in 1997. So
Yeah,
it
there
was
you go.
basically
97.
independent for like 150 years, minus Japanese occupation 41 to 45.
Right. Okay, so then technically.
These are all Chinese films, technically.
Yeah, yeah.
Technically.
Well, the other one is Indonesian, so that one's not.
Oh, okay.
That one's not
Yes.
Chinese.
But the other two are Chinese.
The other two are Chinese, from a Chinese perspective, I suppose. Those movies are Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Ang Lee's 2000 masterpiece. A lot of people really like this movie. I was not such a big fan, but we'll get there. I watched the 36th Chamber of Shaolin because of the Wu-Tang album. I had to watch the dub version, so that was kind of sucky. But it was kind of funny also. And then the Indonesian one is The Raid, or if you're American, The Raid Redemption, because the studio didn't get the rights to just The Raid. In the United States, they had to add redemption to it. I don't know why. I've never heard of a studio having that problem. But I guess that is the reason they gave. I think we'll start with 36 Chamber, just because we'll go in chronological order, I suppose. 36 Chamber of Shaolin, 1978. I'm going to butcher every single name except for
Nice.
Ang Lee. The director is Lau Kar Leung. Writer is Kwang Ni. Starring Chia Hu Liu, Lei Lo, and Yue Wang. This movie is kind of awesome in the exact opposite way that The Raid is awesome, because The Raid is maybe one of the best action movies of all time. It has some of the best action sequences. Whenever people talk about action in movies that's like really good, they're like, oh well, it's no John Wick or The Raid. Like those are the two golden standards in terms of action sequences. But 36 Chamber of Shaolin, it is so cheap, but also kind of endearing and kind of cool. The way it's written and directed kind of carries the movie over the budgetary issues. And I had a lot of concerns going into it, because like the first fight scene, there's two guys that are wearing very obvious wigs. Like you can see like the line on their hairline of like where the glue was meeting their skin, and they were wielding like, I don't want to say cardboard swords, but it was something very similar to cardboard they were using, and then they just like spray painted it silver. Like the swords were really, really thick and wobbly. I never once believed that they were made out of metal. And also, it has like the Dawn of the Dead problem, in that they had no idea how to make realistic looking fake blood, so it's like neon red for some reason. And so like that first fight scene happens between these two guys, and it is like, oh no, what am I getting into? I'm like, this is like this is, this is a VHS that someone found in like a dumpster somewhere and edited it. This is a New York Ninja. This is, this wasn't meant to be finished. And then the movie went on, and it is so awesome. It it rules so much, because right after that, the main character, it follows the kind of like hero's journey trope where, the main character, his family gets killed, and like all of his friends get killed. So then he goes away to the Shaolin Temple to learn Kung Fu so that he can avenge his family and retake China from the evil Manchus, I believe. Those are the bad guys. And so, that premise is not anything crazy. That's like every single movie. But I'm a sucker for like training sequences. Like you can't tell me that those sequences in Kill Bill aren't some of the best. I mean, I think like the best parts of Kill Bill, you got the end fight of part one, where just like that whole sequence where she's got the yellow motorcycle suit and she's chopping everybody up with her katana. And then I really like those training montages with her and the guy in the big fake beard that keeps wisping it away in the wind. And if you ever wanted to watch a movie that's like 75% training sequences, then this is the movie for you. Because we see him go through probably like 10-ish chambers, and we see him fail and then slowly get better at every single thing. And it's very specific things where it's like, this exercise is just to build wrist strength. Or like this one, you gotta hold this bucket of water up over your head, or else the blades on the side they're gonna hit your sides if you don't hold it exactly high up. And so you see a lot of that, but it doesn't really. I never really got tired of it. It was really fun to see this guy. He starts as like a complete scrub, but by the end, he's like a super awesome warrior, and it feels totally earned because we just spent like an hour watching him grow from this little baby into an awesome warrior monk. I guess the one complaint is that once he finally becomes a super awesome kung fu guy, the him like avenging his family all takes place in like the last 15 minutes, and then the movie just ends. So that might be an issue, but honestly, it's so sick. I highly recommend it. That being said, I was trying to find the sub version somewhere, but I could not. So I had to watch the dub version on Amazon. It's on Amazon Prime, so if you've got Prime, then you can watch 36th Chamber of Shaolin. I think the dubbed version is sampled in that Wu-Tang record, because that's probably
That's probably where they got it all.
yeah, that's and that's probably the version that they probably would have found in the 90s in New York in America. I doubt they would have had subtitles for VHSs. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. I highly recommend it. It's a 3.5 out of 5 for me. But, yeah, pretty good. It's higher than I was expecting. Now let's talk about one that was lower than I was expecting. It's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And I feel like I'm going to get shot in the streets for this one. Because this one is, I mean, especially on Letterboxd, it was sitting at like a 4.0, which is insanely high for Letterboxd. I think like the highest thing ever on Letterboxd is a 4.6, 4.7-ish, around there. Nothing has a perfect score on Letterboxd, so a 4.0 out of 5 is pretty dang good. And I think this was Ang Lee's first kind of, especially a breakout movie in the international market, I would say. He made like short movies and movies in Taiwan before then, but they never really got outside of that market. But Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon definitely kind of exploded and got him famous. So much so that his follow-up movie was a comic book movie, Hulk, in 2003. Not the one that's in the MCU. He did not make the 2008 movie, The Incredible Hulk. He made Hulk in 2003, where there's a neon green Hulk that's like CGI and he smashes a tank. I have not seen that movie, but it doesn't look good. But it's okay, because he followed up Hulk with Brokeback Mountain. This guy has like the weirdest career ever. And then he made Gemini Man. Well, I guess that wasn't a direct line. It wasn't Brokeback Mountain to Gemini Man, but Gemini Man's what he made most recently. But Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. This is the first wuxia movie I've seen, which was a term I was unfamiliar with. until I had to look it up. But I think Wuxia, it comes from like ancient China. Like when I was looking it up, it was like from like 200 BCE, I think. But the term basically describes like Chinese stories about like martial arts, like masters, and there's usually like a supernatural element to it. Um, I feel like most people know the Wuxia tropes, even if you haven't seen a Wuxia movie. Um, there's like, like people like flying around, and there's like running on like ceramic roofs, uh, big sword fights where they're like flying all over the place. It's very like a proto anime type thing. It wouldn't surprise me if anime got a lot of inspiration from old Wuxia stuff. But this is like, it's probably the most, like, the biggest Wuxia movie ever. I think it did very, very well. But I guess I should probably go over the crew. Directed by Ang Lee. It is not written by Ang Lee. It's written by Huey Lin Wang, James Seamus, and Kuo Jong Shai. It's starring Michelle Yeoh. I think this was one of her breakout roles. Just won an Academy Award. But yeah, she's one of the main characters in this movie. And then there's Chow Yun Fat and Ziyi Zhang. Again, I'm sorry, I'm butchering every single one of these names. But yeah. Yeah, so this movie, it's I think it's technically like a Wuxia epic, in that it takes place over multiple years, and it's very grand in scope. Even though the plot is really kind of simple, but it kind of falls apart in the end for me. And it's set up very clear, and then there's like long flashback sequences that honestly were kind of confusing. And yeah, I don't know. It was like, so the setup was Michelle Yeoh and her like warrior friend. There's like a will they won't they type thing where it's like revealed that Michelle Yeoh was like she was going to marry this guy, and his best friend was this guy that she has this relationship with. But then he dies, and so then they both kind of vow, well, we're not going to be in a relationship together to honor our friend slash fiance. And so the warrior friend's like, here's my super epic sword that can slice every other sword in half. I'm tying up my boots. I'm no longer going to be a warrior hero guy. I'm just going to settle down and retire. So Michelle Yeoh, why don't you give the sword to our friend that has a big house in the capital city of China, which I don't know what it would have been back then. So she delivers the sword, and then, a bandit steals it. So the plot, okay, we got to get the sword back. We got to catch the bandit, because only the righteous guy should have the sword, because, he's the best guy in the whole world. But then it kind of gets convoluted where, like, the main bad guy's not a bad guy, and then, like, the bad guy that was pulling all the strings just disappears for, like, the majority of the movie, and then she comes back in the final, like, moment, only to die immediately. It was really, I don't want to say, like, bad, but it was just really sloppy, and especially how it ended, like, honestly, like, the last, like, act of the movie, I was so bored, like, and, yeah, I don't think I was going into this with very high expectations because Ang Lee has made some great movies. Life of Pi and Brokeback Mountain, fantastic movies. Gemini Man is funny because he's got young Will Smith and old Will Smith, and they fight each other. That's awesome. I've not seen Gemini Man, but I'm assuming it's probably the best movie of all time. So, yeah, I don't know. I did not much care for Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. I gave it a 2.5 out of 5. It's very middle of the road. Because I would say that most of the fight scenes are pretty cool. I do like my fight scenes to be more grounded. I don't really like people like flying around and slicing each other. You know, have it be more grounded than that. Especially because I don't think the special effects were done very well in this movie. I recognize that it came out in 2000, but it was very obvious that all of the people were like on wires and like swinging around when they were supposed to be like flying. I think even back then they probably could have found better ways to do that, but yeah, I don't know. So let's talk about the best movie of all time, The Raid. Written and directed by Gareth Evans, starring Iko Uwais, Dani Alamsyah, Yaya Ruhian, and Ray Sarahetapa. Sorry. This is the Indonesian one. This movie is awesome. I think it might be my new favorite action movie, beating the previous one, Speed. I think this has kind of become a thing in that I think more fight coordinators just need to make movies, because I think Gareth Evans was a fight coordinator, and the guys who did John Wick were both fight coordinators and like stunt guys. So like these people who know fights make like the best action movies. And I mean, I guess that's kind of obvious, but
Who knew?
yeah. Yeah, it came out in 2011. Indonesian. The story is very simple, but the story doesn't matter. The fight scenes are just so sick. Basically, it takes there's like a unit of like Indonesian SWAT, and they're gonna do this raid, like the name of the movie. They're doing this raid on this guy, and the bad guy, it's kind of sick. Like, he's not like a drug kingpin or you know, some like super evil bad guy that wants to destroy the whole world. He is an evil landlord, which I think is awesome. He's a landlord specifically for criminals. If you are a criminal that is on the lam, you're running away from the law, this guy will be your landlord. And you can pay him rent, and you can stay at his apartment building. So the whole movie takes place in an apartment building filled with criminals. And the SWAT team, they get up to like the 6th floor with, you know, they manage to sneak through. None of the alarms are tripped. And then one of the kids that are like the lookout, they manage to slip past the SWAT team and alert the whole building. And now they're surrounded. They have reinforcements coming in from the bottom of the building, and they've got a building full of criminals that are all going to kill all the cops. And it's pretty G-dang epic, because then, you know, there's just one guy. There's one super awesome police guy that, you know, just kicks the crap out of everybody, and it's so awesome. The martial art style that they use, I've never seen in a movie, I guess, before this one. It's called Penkat Salat. It is like, it is so brutal. And they really don't shy away from the brutality. I think specifically it's like a mix of both like unarmed strikes combined with like a weapon. So like through the majority of the movie, the guy is using like um, kind of like a big, yeah, I mean like, you know, a big old knife, but he's like holding it backwards in like his right hand. Um, and then there's a lot of like grappling and then targeting the joints. So it is incredibly brutal, um, but it's also so sick. Like I cannot underplay how sick this movie is. Plus, the score is done by Mike Shinoda of Linkin Park. So the music is just this epic rock music as this Indonesian cop is just kicking all sorts of ass. It is it is the best. I I think this is one of my favorite movies I've seen in recent memory. Like this, I had such a good time, and there was like so many times as I was watching it, were like, oh shit, like just like completely in awe of like what they were doing. Like it was so brutal, but it was so fun. And I'm not someone that I don't really like gore or body horror or anything like that, but man, a good action sequence, that it's just a whole lot of fun. So if you're into that sort of thing, I would highly recommend it. Um, I think I'm gonna upgrade it. I had it listed as a 4 out of 5, but I think I might bump it to a 4.5 out of 5. The movie's awesome. So just watch that one. I would say if all of these, I would recommend that one the most. And then if you're into like schlocky, kung fu movies, I don't know if it gets much better than the 36 Chamber of Shaolin. So check that one out. And then if you're a fan of Chinese historical epics, then I guess you could check out Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, even though I didn't really like it. But that's it. That's it for movie review time. I don't know what I'm going to do next week. It was kind of arbitrary that I picked all martial arts movies. But I do kind of like doing one genre. I was thinking it might be interesting to do all James Bond movies next week, but also that would require me watching 3 James Bond movies. I'm not really interested in doing that. Um, so
Wow, you're not.
no, I'm not a big fan of the
Come on.
James Bond. I've seen Casino Royale, the new one. I think that's the first one that Daniel Craig was in. Um, and I thought it was pretty good, but I'm not interested in seeing like Sean Connery James Bond or any of those old ones. I am not a super big fan of those, but I might just knock them out. Why not? I think I have to watch like 4 or 5 of them, so we'll see. But that's it for me. I think we'll switch on over to music.
There's not a lot this week.
Oh no.
Talk about the new Mine and Kaytranada record. Kaytramine came out Friday. It's decent. I don't have a lot to say about this actually. Not as good as I think people were expecting it to be, unfortunately. I think a lot of people, myself included, were kind of looking forward to a more like hip hop house kind of summer record because that's what the single kind of was. That's not really what this whole record is, though, unfortunately. It's a lot less summery than I thought it would be, especially given the cover and everything. I'm like, this should be the best summer jams ever. Didn't really live up to that, I would say. Beats are still super fun. I think Kaytranada definitely carries the record. I usually don't have any issues with the Mine's writing, but it seems a little lackluster on this one. It could be because they're trying to play into the hip house kind of genre where lyrics aren't, the most important, but
Yeah.
when you don't actually get that kind of sonic palette, it comes across as kind of lazy. I don't know. There's a fine line in pop rap where you have to be kind of fun without being like cheesy. Usually he toes that line really well, but I feel like this one was a little. But there are some good songs. I really like the one with Freddie Gibbs. The one with Snoop Dogg is really good as well. I feel like I need to listen to it more to get like full thoughts on it. But my first kind of impressions on it were that it was passable,
Oh,
but not as good as everybody was kind of expecting it to be,
that's too bad.
which is unfortunate.
It showed up on my Spotify, and I'm like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, Babby was talking about that. That could be a good time, but I guess not.
I mean, it's still good. I'd still recommend it. But I think it doesn't reach the levels that a lot of people were expecting it to be. It's still a great album to put on the background when you're doing anything outside or driving around and stuff like that. So, still pretty decent. But when it comes to like Amine records in general, I don't think this is anywhere near his strongest one. There are a ton of fantastic Amine albums though. So, pretty decent. It just didn't live up to the expectation I gave it, which was, probably higher than it should have been. But,
Yeah.
it happens. So that happened this week. Arm & Hammer did a collab with this group called Shaped Noise, which is a noise band. If you can call noise a band, I don't know. Noise producer, I think I'll say. But really cool collab. This is, I wish they did this more. Like actual noise outfits, kind of like clipping. I love that mixture with hip hop, especially with Arm & Hammer, with how like kind of mysterious and otherworldly they seem at times. This works really well. I love the hits of noise that come in. The verses aren't anything like too in depth when it comes to Arm & Hammer, but it's their kind of repetition playing into this more noisy, harsh sound that I think works really well. So, good single there. I think that came out last Wednesday, so podcast timing.
Of course.
Struck back. There's also more podcast timing because Swans is releasing a single tonight.
Oh,
So-
perfect.
I'll talk about that a week later. But I think that record comes out next month, so super excited for that. Wherever the release date is in here, June 23rd. So got about a month exactly on that actually. I'm realizing that there was a Beyonce and Kendrick Lamar song that I
Yeah.
forgot to listen to.
It got recommended to me, and I'm like, oh yeah, I should listen to that. And then
Mhm.
I did not.
Yeah. I don't remember America Has a Problem from Beyonce's last record. It wasn't like a standout to me. But Beyonce and Kendrick collabs historically have been pretty fantastic with the full one collab that they've had.
Historically, of one, it's very
Yes.
good.
They got a pretty good track record, I'd say. So I will listen to that eventually. There was also a new Post Malone track, Morning. I have not listened to that.
I didn't even know there was a new Post Malone track.
Yeah. Things are just kind of randomly popping out of nowhere, it seems. Like, they don't even come out on Fridays anymore. Things are just kind of happening randomly.
Yeah, this came out May 19th, which, I guess that was
Yeah.
last Friday.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah. I
Like,
just
I didn't hear about it
it.
like, yesterday, and I'm like, oh,
I follow him
Okay.
on Twitter. He didn't post
Yeah.
about it.
I
That's
don't
so
know.
weird,
I don't
yeah.
know what's happening. Music is so weird this year. I don't really. Usually, I'm like on top of it. I know everything that's coming out. I listen to all of it. This year is just like a Wild West for some reason.
Yeah, so weird.
A little bit strange. I think the only other thing to look forward to, I think Billy Woods and Kenny Segal are doing a KEXP live studio kind of thingy, which is very exciting. I always love watching those. It's like it's basically like Tiny Desk, except there's no tiny desk. And they're in a studio for a radio show, but it's very good. I know there's a snail mail KEXP, I believe, that's really fantastic. So that's always a good watch when I'm like looking for music on YouTube and live recording. So I'm excited to see that come out. Other than that, I don't think there's any news. There's a Blur album showing up on my coming soon, which is interesting. We'll see if that's real or not. I didn't know Blur was still making music.
I didn't
I'd
either.
imagine it was just Gorillaz at this point, but I guess not. Yeah, I think that's it for music. So, very light week, besides the
Yeah.
one album release. But we'll see. We'll see what I have next week, if I have anything for next week, because it doesn't look like anything's coming.
Perfect.
Besides one Swan song. I'll take up 20 minutes of just talking about a 4-minute song.
Oh, it's not even going to be a long Swan song?
No, it's not even a long one, I don't think.
No.
The longest one's 44 minutes. They're not releasing that one as a single.
No,
That would be kind of insane.
Yeah.
Although Arca did it, so I don't know. I
Oh,
don't know
that's
anymore.
true. That's true.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's it for the music section. We can move on. I did not chat GPT a name this week.
Wow.
I was struggling to get
Can't
these
believe
notes
you.
together for this segment today, so we'll see how it goes. It's so hard to write when I'm like, I have work all day, and then I have to come home, and then I chill out, and then I need to get back in the headspace to write, and it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
So this might be very jumbled, but I'm gonna try to give it as straightforward as I can. But I'm starting a series. This might be a 2 or 3-parter. I want to do a Radio Free segment, which is basically bubbling down to just how Asia is kind of treated in U.S. and Western media, very broadly, but I'm going to kind of zoom in on the Koreas for these next couple of weeks. This week is just going to be a little recap of the Korean War, because I feel like a lot of people don't know a lot about the Korean War.
It gets overshadowed by the other one.
Yeah, it's overshadowed by the other one.
Yeah.
It's kind of sandwiched between two. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
World War
true.
II just ended, and then everybody just talks about Vietnam and forgets Korea happened.
Right.
So, talk about Korean War a little bit, just to give, because I think for next week's segment, to truly understand it, we kind of need a background of what happened during that war. I will also give a recap next week of how the two countries kind of built back after the war. I did not have time to do that this week, unfortunately, just because it is a lot of history and a lot of research I need to do for it, and it is difficult.
Yes.
But as always, if you want a deeper dive into this, Blowback is a whole season on this war, so I definitely recommend that, because they go into every single nook and cranny that you could ever want with this thing. It's a fantastic season, so definitely recommend that. Also, check out Bruce Cummings, which is kind of he's one of the biggest kind of Korean history experts that's in the English language, so he's a huge resource as well. But we can just dive in. We'll see how this goes. My notes page is so jumbled, it's insane. But we're gonna go back to right after World War II. I guess to start, for reference, Korea was under Japanese colonial rule for I think quite a while before this point. So when Japan surrendered in 1945, it was up to the Allied forces to figure out what to do with all these little nooks and crannies of Japan's empire, and that included the Koreas, or just one Korea at that point. The border was actually something that came up before a meeting between all the Allied powers to figure out what was up with this piece of land that they now all have to deal with. So someone on the American side drew up because there was no natural border between in this landmass, so they kind of drew up on a map, and then they saw this 38th parallel kind of draw right through the borders, and they decided to go with that. So that was what was proposed. The Soviets took a really weird. It's not weird once you know the context of how everybody was doing at this point, but in grand retrospect, weird. They were kind of chill with doing this. Stalin was kind of just like, yeah, okay, let's go for it. I think this was mostly due to how weak the Red Army was after World War II, since they did have the most casualties from their side. So they were not really in a position to kind of contest this. They knew that the U.S. would probably eventually get knocking on their door, but he did not want to kind of tackle that now. He wanted to save that for later. So it was agreed that the 38th parallel would be a border. So all troops south of the border were surrendering to the Japanese troops south of the border were surrendering to the Americans, and the North would surrender to the USSR. So the Soviets their goal with the Koreas was to kind of just help the Koreas get going, and then kind of help them with reunification. That was their kind of main objective when it comes to Korea. It was kind of an afterthought. I think they had a lot bigger issues than dealing with this.
Yeah.
But it is important to note that the Koreans were not once asked if they wanted a border or what they wanted with their land after being freed from Japanese colonial rule and then immediately getting thrown into kind of a push and pull match by the two biggest powers.
Yeah.
Another note that not a lot of people know, more than 25% of those killed in the Nagasaki and Hiroshima bombings were Koreans working in Japan. So massive casualties already on the Korean side in a war that they weren't even involved in. I just want to hone in how much suffering these people go through without even being the cause of any of it.
Right.
As I go through this. But U.S. lands in South Korea, and it immediately begins a military occupation, and they kind of treated it as like enemy territory still. The U.S. does not have a good track record in the Pacific. They are awful, actually. They are very structured and kind of like rule bent on warfare. And the Asian countries that they have fought up against historically obviously are not like that. It's guerrilla warfare tactics. It's using the environment. So they just get demolished.
Yeah.
So they are being very cautious as they enter South Korea. But the main objective of this government was to keep communist governments out and kind of prime this land for a more capitalist powerhouse to come out of it eventually. So they kind of set it up for landlords and free markets. They took back the seized properties that the Koreans won from the Japanese and that kind of thing. So they also hired a police and military force, and most of these, just because they didn't want to have the look of a U.S. kind of military operation, they hired a lot of the Japanese or a lot of the Koreans who were working with the Japanese Imperial Army during World War II. This is something that they did with all the Axis powers, famously Operation Paperclip, when the U.S. took a lot of the Nazi scientists in and put them into programs like NASA. So that's a fun little tidbit.
Yeah.
As usual, when you have a police state that cracks down on all this, strikes and little uprisings in South Korea were constantly kind of popping up. It's important to note that the Koreans kind of have a more revolutionary past after being kind of controlled by all these different dynasties. They are not strangers to this kind of occupation, so they found that out immediately and were not happy. But police kind of suppressed these movements over and over. Martial law was not uncommon to be placed in these things. So that's kind of the state, like, as soon as America landed and as soon as they started beefing these things up. So Truman was the president at this point. Pretty moderate Democrat, as you'd expect. He's kind of like a Joe Biden if you were going to do today's terms. Super milquetoast, middle of the road kind of guy. And the Truman Doctrine was kind of his answer because there was this was like during the McCarthy era, so the Red Scare was in full effect in the U.S. right now. Mm-hmm. You were getting just like bashed for anything. So to kind of counter this, he kind of ushered in the Truman Doctrine in 1947, which basically says that the U.S. will help any country under the threat of communism. So this is kind of his stance to kind of calm down the insane Republicans that are just like looking for the head of anybody that could be possibly connected to anything red.
Yeah.
So, again, this is just how things happen in the U.S., unfortunately. But elections started happening. In North Korea, the Soviets were involved in kind of helping election security. They were not like near the ballots or anything, but they were just making sure that there wasn't like any outside forces helping it. The Koreans are very nationalistic. That this is kind of through their history as well, as they've always kind of propped up one person as kind of their leader. So in the north, Kim Il-sung was kind of that guy. He was known as a guerrilla that kind of fought earlier in the decade. So there was tons of elections in the north. They closed all the shops and everything and made it kind of like a holiday, so everybody got out and voted. And once they did that, they set up their very central planned government. They again, borrowed a lot of the Soviet model of a heavy industry focus in their 2-year plan, which again is like very cut neck, like it's very, very fast production. They immediately did land reform, gave a lot of peasants rights to the land again. Literacy campaigns were kind of implemented, and they were starting to kind of set up shop here. And the North Korean Workers' Party was kind of formed in 1946 during all the middle of that. So that's kind of how that went. If you go back to the South, Syngman Rhee was kind of placed as the first president of South Korea. He has an interesting history in that he lived in the U.S. for like 37 years. He's still Korean, but like he was very much like just not connected with it. He joined rightist groups or before Japan's fall in World War II. He was in rightist groups in Korea and collaborated with Japanese. So he was incredibly, like, his first kind of years in office were incredibly brutal. He began on cracking down on any communist or any supposed left uprisings. A lot of civilians were included in these just because, like, anybody that was suspected of being a communist would pretty much just be killed because it was a police military state at this point. The biggest climax of this was kind of the Jeju Island incident. This was a Jeju uprising. It was kind of, the message here was people wanted to unify the Koreas again. They were against the kind of split up of the Koreas. And Syngman Rhee was obviously not for that, basically serving all the U.S.'s needs, where it's like the U.S. is like, no, we need to stomp out all of this. There cannot be unification between these. And 30,000 people were killed during this uprising. And there was multiple strikes going on as well during this point. So at the end of it, just during this small period, there was about 100,000 people killed by this government already. This was like the first couple of years in office. And just to note, before we dive into the actual conflict, the People's Republic of China was officially formed in 1948. So China was communist as of 1948. There was a big thing going on at this point where the UN would not recognize the People's Republic of China and the new government. So this led the Soviets to protest the UN, and they did not show up for any delegations regarding the Korean War, which did have some side effects because their voice was not heard when it comes to U.S. involvement in the, or direct U.S. involvement when it comes to the Korean War. So just to note, there's like a million things happening all at once at this point because this is right after a world war and everybody's rebuilding. It's kind of a jumbled mess to kind of state clearly. But we're going to jump forward a little bit because a lot of it is kind of very small things happening in like the USSR, China, both Koreas, the U.S. during this time. Reference blowback for all these little details because I was not able to capture all of them in a good way. But jumping to 1950 is when the actual war starts. So it started with the North invading the South. The North got kind of approval from the USSR and Stalin on this. Again, I feel like Stalin was not very concerned with this at this point because there was other things going on. So he kind of gave the okay. This wasn't like the final deciding factor that made the North invade the South, but it was just kind of a thing where it's like, okay, you have the Soviet support, but despite having Soviet support, there was no weapons or troops or aid that ever touched the North. It was purely vocal. So yeah, the North invades the South, kind of storms into South Korea, and the actual warfare of this was very, very much attrition. It was a lot of back and forth, a lot of push and pull. The U.S. obviously joined in with the South Koreans, but it was not. The U.S. actually left for a little bit, so they did not have troops on the ground, but the South Korean government obviously had close ties with it. And Syngman Rhee kind of took matters into his own hands here, again, because he continued his crackdown on any communist forces. As the North kind of starts invading, he gets like paranoid. So this leads to the Bodo League massacre, which or the Summer of Terror, depending on who you ask. This involved another 100,000 communists and people sympathetic to the North Korean cause to be killed. It's just so much death in their own borders, and there's a war going on. But with this, the Americans also send in General Douglas MacArthur to South Korea. So he's going to take command of all UN and U.S. forces that are deployed, and is kind of the grand general of this conflict. General MacArthur is kind of an insane person, insanely right-wing Christian, like hilariously so. If you like listen to any of his speeches after this thing, he tried to do a political campaign, and he was like one of the most loved men in America up until this political campaign. But once he gave a couple of speeches, people were so put off by him that like he fell out of the polls completely. Super hardline Christian. But as he arrives, this kind of push and pull is continuing to happen on ground troops, and eventually it gets to the point where General MacArthur wants to go into North Korean territory and cross the 38th parallel. This was heavily contested within the U.S. or the U.S. Government, because they were very concerned about China joining the conflict, and that would, most certainly mean full-scale war. If that doesn't sound familiar, I don't know what to tell you. It's like, but MacArthur kind of lied about this. He's like, nah, there's no way the Chinese would get involved. Like, why would they do that? So they signed off on MacArthur. There was also a lot of pressure on the State Department because MacArthur was incredibly popular. So going against your grand general in this great war that you're fighting in the East would not do very well for Truman's numbers that were already falling. So he agreed, and they went across with it. So MacArthur and the UN-US's forces go through in North Korea and kind of take the offensive. This gets to the point where they do drive the North Koreans back quite a bit, all the way up to the Yalu River, which is pretty much the border on China from North Korea at this point. And MacArthur was definitely wrong when it comes to the Chinese soldiers, because soon after, more than 100,000 Chinese soldiers arrived in North Korea and basically ambushed all of these forces, kind of driving them back again into South Korea. This was Blowback does a good job at kind of analyzing why all these forces kind of joined at the time they did. Mao was very concerned about if the U.S. would take control of the North, they would be right on the border of China and the USSR. So there was very much concern of being close to borders, and that the U.S. was going to be looking to invade China. So that was kind of the reasoning there, and the fact that some of the North Korean guerrillas did help China in their efforts with Formosa or Taiwan for today, because that's where the past government of China kind of fled to after the revolution took over. Yeah. They went to Taiwan. So that's kind of a crash course in that area. It's very complicated. I'm trying to boil it down to the simplest thing possible. But the war continues on. The China's People Volunteer Army and the Korean's People Army kind of drive back the troops again, and North Korea retakes Seoul for the second time. If you can't tell by this point, nothing's really getting done. They are just pushing back and forth between the border and between the territory. It's a really strange kind of conflict. But eventually, MacArthur kind of loses it and takes matters into his own hands, goes against his president and his state, and threatens a full-scale war with China. This is insane.
So...
Yeah. He kind of put it bluntly, where he's like, the goal of eliminating communism from the East and eliminating global communism, he took that so personally, where he wanted to literally invade China as part of this war. Obviously, they could not have that, because that is just ridiculous. So Truman did end up firing MacArthur, and he was discharged immediately, and that's when his little political career started a couple years later. So After this point, there's debates on like that the war didn't really end, which is true. It's just an armistice. It's not a peace treaty. Um, but this was in 51 by the time that MacArthur was gone, and the war didn't end until 53. So between these 2 years, there was like off again, on again peace conferences that were like delayed constantly. All the while, the U.S. and UN forces are still bombing North Korea. Um, so there was no way of like getting a peace talk because neither side was, or the U.S. specifically was not coming to peace delegations. The communist side was like very, very generous in their peace negotiations. They offered to kind of like move all communist influence out of North Korea and have it completely self governed. Um, there was like they even like didn't care that the 38th parallel would stay because they were originally like, you need to get rid of this fake border. These people need to be united because they obviously do not want a split border. So they even gave up that. They basically gave up like all of their kind of agreements um, until the U.S. finally was like, okay, let's agree to the Korean Armistice Agreement in 1953. So that ends the Korean War, but it's not a peace treaty. It just ends the direct military conflict. Um, and a couple years after that, people really did think it was a temporary thing. Um, it was very on edge still for a while, but this is still lasting to this day. There hasn't really been like a military conflict between the two that I know of. I will next week kind of catch up on how these two countries kind of rebuilt after this, um, just because it is very interesting to see the paths that they both take. Um, but with that being said, that's kind of a recap of the Korean War, but I do want to go back and kind of touch on some keystone things that are just incredibly alarming. Um, and something that, like, again, we do not get taught this in school, and it's kind of, it's sickening every time I have to, like, research the Korean War again, or, listen to blowback about it, because it is truly just, like, insanity. Um, so first off, the casualties were anywhere from 2 million to 4 million on both sides, South Koreans and North Koreans, as well as U.S. and UN troops. I don't know the specific breakdowns for those, but um, this was actually the debut of the napalm bomb that the U.S. was famously using in Vietnam. Um, so basically, it's, I mean, I think we all know what napalm is. Um,
Yeah.
Drop it from the planes, the fire spreads, it burns. Um, so this was debuted in the Korean War. Um, the bombs that the U.S. dropped on North Korea, there was a total of 635,000 tons of bombs dropped in Korea, including 32,000 tons of napalm. Most of this on the North Korean side. By comparison, the U.S. dropped 500,000 tons in the Pacific Theater during the entirety of World War II. This resulted in 85% of North Korean buildings being destroyed, completely demolished, unsalvageable. Um, and the way that the napalm would work is it would be dropped, it would obviously detonate on impact and like blow up parts of a building, but then the fires would constantly ravage all the buildings and villages and burn everything to the ground. And the fun part about some of these bombs were there was delayed explosions on some, so that they would essentially remove any chance of firefighters putting out the fires because there were still live bombs that would go off later. So it was a complete and utter annihilation of anything that could be considered a military target. This term was very, very, very stretched, and it kind of ended up including all human-made structures. Um, and this resulted in an estimated 1.5 million total North Korean casualties during the war. And a lot of those are civilian casualties as well. They did not kind of differentiate between civilian and army when it comes to this. They literally were just bombing everything in sight. This has been kind of compared to a genocide, depending on who you ask, since it was just a complete destruction of all society in North Korea. North Koreans had to live in caves during this war. It was a very mountainous area, so they had to build cave systems that had all of their kind of hospitals and schools and everything in it, and they had to live underground for a while. Um, And they also destroyed major dams that were, a big thing for agriculture. It flooded farms. It brought drought. All of that. So absolutely unfathomable military exercises that, again, we are not taught about. We basically almost demolished an entire country in the span of like probably it's like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
There's also another kind of, I'm going to call it an allegation since there isn't 100% confirmed kind of snippet of evidence that we can use for this, but there are tons of little pieces of evidence that can be kind of built up into this, and you can make a very strong case for it. But there were heavy allegations of germ warfare used by the U.S. On North Koreans. This was specifically taken in the form of spreading smallpox through chicken feathers. This was something that was kind of used in Unit 731 by the Japanese. The Japanese were very big into this kind of German chemical warfare, so the Koreans are pretty used to it. 731 was this World War II kind of army that would take prisoners. They do crazy experiments on them, just like some of the most brutal stuff imaginable. Absolutely, like, incredibly disturbing things. You can look it up yourself. Viewer discretion is advised for that, obviously. It's kind of insane. But the U.S. hired a lot of these kind of Japanese, these people that were at 731. They hired them and kind of wanted to learn about the bio experiments that they were kind of doing during the war. So it is very understandable that they could possibly take this and use it as, their own weapon. There are also kind of there are testimonies from pilots that were actually in the Korean War that kind of allude to something like this happening. There are reports of U.S. soldiers in like hazmat suits that would go into buildings and kind of disperse feathers everywhere. And there were epidemics of smallpox in 4 of the major North Korean cities. They were not close to each other. The timing of the troops going through would not be enough to transmit between the two, or between all the cities. So there's a lot of evidence that could suggest that this possibly happened. So just devastating stuff in a war that didn't really solve anything.
No.
In an area that has been constantly brutalized by imperial forces, it has been constantly brutalized and resource extracted and everything. So, terrifying war. Again, one of the most like maddening things when you look it up, because it's like, this is so comically evil in a sense, where it's like, how do we not know about this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
one good
insanity.
thing did come out of it is that Douglas MacArthur was put in charge of Japan.
Yes. A much better thing for him.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
That man's a nut job.
Yeah, I did a whole paper on that. It was very interesting. He's a really weird dude, but like, for some reason, he had like a couple good things he did in Japan. Like, he was like really, really like staunch about getting women the right to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this does not make any sense with
no.
what is going on. Just everything else I was reading about him was like absolutely crazy, and he's like, no, women must vote. Like,
Thanks,
okay,
Satan.
thanks.
He yearned for the ballot box.
Yeah.
He had to get his one saving grace out.
I guess.
But
like a weird guy.
yeah, just absolute demon of a man.
Yeah.
It's also good to note that Sigmund Rhee, once his government was, or once the people finally were like too much for him, finally fled to Hawaii, which is kind of common for U.S.-backed dictators. They either go to Florida or Hawaii or somewhere. So it's the same playbook with all these people. You get instituted, you kind of do your thing, you do all like the U.S.'s bidding in this thing, and then when it gets too hot, you dip.
Yeah.
It's just kind of how it works. But yeah, with this war, you can see a lot of the U.S.'s Cold War tactics popping up. Some things that still remain to this day. I'm going to talk next week about kind of this idea of manufacturing consent through media, and the whole bunch of fake news that comes out of this area. But I wanted to give this week just an overall history, just a very, very simple history of this war, a major conflict that we are not really taught about in the U.S. It's called the Forgotten War in the U.S., which is kind of a slap in the face after everything I just explained. But yeah, everybody's like, let's focus on Vietnam instead, or we still got beaten.
Yeah, I
So-
don't know. There's no good Korean War movies that I know of. There's like 1,700 Vietnam movies.
Yeah, I think there are some pretty good movies about the Korean War. I'd have to get a list together. I do want to do, that might be my part 3 for this. There are some Blowback Premium episodes that I have that are bonus episodes that talk about like North Korean cinema and stuff. So I feel like that might be interesting to talk about.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because apparently Kim Il Sung was like a major, or I don't know, Kim Jong Il was like a major film buff.
You know, I could see that.
Yeah. But next week I'll talk about how these places kind of built back up and how their current governments kind of look like, just a broad overview, and then we'll start getting into some of the fun stuff. I want to talk about Yongmi Park because I feel like that's the popular North Korean defector that everybody kind of brings up, and that was taken seriously for a while until this year when she went on a whole bunch of podcasts and just went absolutely off the rails. There's clips of her on Joe Rogan. I feel like most people have probably seen at least one clip where she's like, the trains in North Korea don't run, so everybody has to get out and push because there's no electricity, so we have to push the train from one stop to the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about her a little bit. She's kind of a more funny example where it's like very easy to spot the misinformation, but we'll also get into the kind of radio free campaigns and the whole like, oh, Kim Jong-un died and his sister's, in charge now, or every time North Korea launches a nuclear missile test, it's like, oh my God, they're going to destroy the entire continental United States. But also at the same time, look at how funny and stupid this guy is. It's kind of a common tactic for the U.S. to be like, we're going to dehumanize this area and make them seem less than human, but at the same time, they're the most evil. Like, they can destroy all of us with the click of a button at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's a really, really kind of cool way that they present all this to us. So we'll dive into that next week, which is kind of the main thing for this section of the podcast. That's what I want to get to the meat of. But unfortunately, the leftist meme of like everything taking 17 paragraphs to explain is true. So I do have to like give the historical context for all of this before we dive into the actual meat of things. But next week will be more fun than this. This was a heavy episode. Next week we'll make it a little bit lighter.
Yeah. We can do that.
And that's all I got.
All right. Well, I guess we have that to look forward to. I don't know what else is happening, except for the PlayStation thing.
Not much.
Next week.
We'll see when Valve releases the CS2 beta tomorrow. It's a wild guess.
Yeah,
They had their last major, and they just didn't do any announcement for CS2, which is like the best platform to do it. But then I remember that Valve doesn't have a marketing team, and they just make the game.
Yeah.
And they just rely on everybody else to do everything for them.
Yeah. I don't know what they're gonna do. What's going on over there?
Nobody knows.
No.
They're crazy.
Yeah. I don't think nothing big's happening. Probably have a lot more movie reviews of recent stuff in June. Got a couple big June releases, including, speaking of Wes Anderson, his new movie,
True.
which I've heard is very good.
Mm.
Although, that's what everyone says about every one of his movies.
Yeah.
And even though they're all the same, they are different.
True. They're all good.
They're all good. Yeah, that's the thing. They're all the same
that's the
movie,
point.
but they're good. They're consistently good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The final episode of Succession is this week too. So
That's right. I think Barry's ending soon too.
I forgot Barry has a new season too.
Yeah.
Dang it.
Yeah, I know. I'm behind on everything, and
I'm caught up on Succession at least.
oh,
so.
well, okay. I need to watch Succession. I watched like half of the first episode, and then I had to do something else.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, I know. People have been talking about it, and I'm surprised it hasn't gotten spoiled for me yet.
True.
But yeah, instead of watching all that, I've been like in the background as I've been playing Zelda. I've been watching Nathan For You, which
Yes.
very good show.
Classic.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why. I wanted something like light in the background. I didn't want to watch Succession while I was playing Zelda. But yeah, Nathan For You is a good show. I didn't know it was an absolutely production.
Yeah, it is. It makes a lot of sense.
It does. It's like every time I find an Adult Swim show, I'm like, oh, this is nice. And then as soon as it ends, it says, absolutely. I'm like, yes, this is the best. I love absolutely.
I think the new episodes of Clone High are on Max now, too.
Yeah, the new app came out. You have to download a new app.
Yeah.
And it's worse.
Yeah, no, the TV app is super laggy.
Just keep the same app.
Yeah.
You finally got to a place where the app works. Why did you make a new app?
Yeah, this is the worst decision that's ever been made, I think.
Yeah, especially, I don't know if you've seen this. I've been getting ads for Max that the slogan is like, the place to watch HBO.
Yeah, exactly. Did I not say that 2 weeks ago? Where I'm like, their SEO is going to be so bad. How are they going to like do this? The marketing team's going to be losing their minds trying to do this because they're going to have to include HBO in it somewhere.
Yeah. It's like, why even get rid of HBO if that's going to be the main marketing poll that you're going to use?
It was not the marketing team that decided the name
No,
change. That's for sure. It's like some
It was all suits.
big exec who's just like has no idea how any of this functions.
Listen,
They're
we all
just
know
like, yep, here you go.
David Zaslav is not a fan of movies. So he just is like, whatever,
Oh, it's
Max.
Max.
Yeah, I saw something. They put out a statement once they announced that like Max was going to be the name, and they're like, actually, we ran a number of focus tests that actually said that most people didn't know what HBO is. And it's like, no, I don't know who you're asking.
Yeah.
These people just don't watch TV. You asked like a bunch of old people that almost exclusively listen to like audiobooks or something. It's like, I don't know.
After watching Succession for the past couple of weeks, like, and being in that headspace, it just makes all these decisions so much funnier because I know how accurate Succession is to the real world.
Yeah, everyone is just Roman Roy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, hopefully without the dick pics sent to their dad.
You never know.
But, it's hard to say.
That's just kind of quirky. That just happens
Sometimes. And then they just kind of like brush it under the rug and don't ever bring it up again. Yeah, so who knows? I might get caught up on Succession. I probably won't.
Whenever you do, we'll talk about it.
We'll talk about it.
We'll probably need to have a lengthy discussion about it. Maybe.
Yeah, I probably should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.